The first thing I do when my first lecture, I always start the same. I start by saying entrepreneurship sucks. And then I wait silently, and people start looking at each other like, whoa, what are we doing here? And then I follow by, unless you have the right frame of mind.
Welcome to the MindTech podcast, where we dive deep into the unsolved problems in mental health with the people building technology to solve them, including founders, investors, and experts in technology for the mind. I'm Manu, your host, and I am delighted to introduce today's guest, Michel Birnbaum, the co-founder and CEO of Mindsigns Health, a platform that assesses brain health with two AI-enabled products: NeuroBrowser, which automatically interprets EEGs for the brain, and GenMind, which monitors mental health from smartphone data. Ultimately, Mindsigns Health supports clinicians to make more informed decisions and measures progress with functional outcomes. I've had the privilege of being an advisor to Mindsigns Health over the past couple of years, and it has been an honor to contribute to such a technologically advanced product that improves access to care and quality of care. Michel has developed the Lab to Market curriculum at the Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology Center, and in this podcast, he explains these principles and how he has implemented them at Mindsigns Health. Let's get into it. Welcome, Michel, and thank you for joining all the way from Singapore, where, of course, Mindsigns Health is based. How is everything over there?
Good. Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the interesting discussion.
Of course, yes. Before we dive into that interesting discussion, all the problems that Mindsigns is working to solve, I just want to start with what initially inspired this journey of yours. I've had to recap on your variety of experiences in your wonderful career, and just to list a few of the roles that you've had. You've worked as an engineer at General Electric, as a director in investment banking and life sciences, as the CEO of a VC firm listed on the London Stock Exchange all across US, Europe, and Asia. And now you're the CEO of Mindsigns Health in Singapore. So, can you take us back to the beginning, connecting the dots, looking backwards, and explain all the milestones that led you here?
I think it's always been about, I've always been interested in building things, right? Even when I worked for GE, I worked on the military side and the military engine group, but it was on new projects, the Apache, the Black Hawk helicopter, where I worked on the power plant side of those machines. But it was always about building new things or being innovative, and I think that's my career progressed. I think it was building things, but trying to be impactful in those things as well. And then I had the good fortune of almost falling into life science. I'm an aerospace engineer by training, right? But I had the good fortune of being surrounded and mentored by some great people that kind of tugged me along, and eventually that's what I decided to do on a full-time basis, is work on various life science projects. So also work on a new class of antibiotics as well, and obviously mind science, which is about brain health and trying to impact people with epilepsy, serious mental illnesses, and trying to use technology to do that.
Yeah, I think the passion for leveraging technology to build products that do good with good people, that is the through line through it all, really. But gradually, healthcare emerged as more of a space that you wanted to occupy. And then specifically within healthcare, mental health.
Mental health, yeah.
What led you to mental health?
Well, as an entrepreneur, and most entrepreneurs have some mental health issues, because it's a pretty lonely journey that you have to go through, and also relatives, people close to me that have had mental health issues. And it's always been kind of, okay, people have mental health issues, until I started looking at, what would eventually become Mindscience and seeing the potential that was being developed by the team and my co-founder, Dr. Justin Dowles, who was working actually on epilepsy at the time. But we were starting to develop other types of technologies, including verbal, non-verbal technologies, and the way this could be applied to monitoring people and trying to not cure, but at least being able to provide information to the care providers, all right? So the healthcare providers, so they could have additional information to improve outcomes. And what we do is we do remote monitoring. So not in the doctor's office, but once the patient leaves the office. And that's one of the big issues is what happens to my patient once that patient leaves the office. And so the ability to be able to monitor these people remotely, kind of, we try to provide a continuum of care. Everybody knows there's information out there, but nobody is able to capture it properly, and that's what we try to do. And hopefully, by doing this, we provide additional information to improve outcomes over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to delve into the details of Mindsigns Health. But before we go into that, can you take us back to the day that you met Justin, your fellow co-founder, and share the spark that initiated Mindsigns Health?
So I was on the VC side before getting on the university side, the academic side, and so one of the first projects, basically, when the university hired me, they said, this is your hunting ground. Go and get them. And so one of the first projects was actually Justin's project, and actually I got to know his students that were working with him on that project, and eventually got really interested in what they were doing, and I could see the potential, especially after I started talking with clinicians, were neurologists, mental health providers, etc., and seeing that there was a need for something like this. Obviously, it needed development, validation, etc., which has taken us on a very long journey to be able to do that. But you could see the potential and also the enthusiasm with which the team was going at it, and including Justin. Everybody was really focused on trying to develop a product or something that would be impactful. And I decided to latch onto that project, and eventually I became the CEO and worked with the team, hired some new team members, and we've been on this product development journey across two segments, which are separate but really related, right? One is EEG, and the other one being obviously mental health. But those two are related. Because, for example, epilepsy is not a neurological disorder, but a neuropsychiatric disorder, right, with potential underlying comorbidities and mental health. So that's what led me to work on this, and that's what gets me up in the morning, right? I'm one of those people that need something to get up in the morning. It's not to the chagrin of my wife. It's not money that drives me. It's more passion and trying to be impactful, and you need that fire in the belly. I mean, when I teach entrepreneurship, one of the first thing I tell my students, and those students are young and old, right? People that want to know what's this entrepreneurship about, is the fact that it cannot be money that drives you, because eventually that loses its shine, right? Especially as you go through the throes of entrepreneurship, it's got to be something else, and it's not being Mark Zuckerberg, because Zuckerberg is all the way up there, right? And you're starting down here, and before you get there, a lot of things are going to happen, and so it's got to be something that gives you fire in the belly. And for me, this is what it is. It's trying to be impactful, trying to help people through the use of technology, and working obviously with clinicians. Everything we do is with clinicians. We don't sit in a corner and develop things. We talk to them see, what are the needs, what are the gaps, how do you want to see things, do you want to see them presented to you, etc. And then we go back in our corner and start working on that. But it's always with that continuous feedback loop.
Yep. Wonderful. Very evidence-based and iterative.
Mm.
So your initial path in VC led you towards, in terms of building technology, then took you to universities where you were really, um, you know, seeing the research that was leading to technology spin-offs. And it was really that fire in the belly that made you feel that being a co-founder, CEO, and entrepreneur would be the most fulfilling thing.
Yeah,
Having experienced how you can make an impact in each of those ways, it's really, leading from the front as an entrepreneur that is most fulfilling to you, and
yeah.
that's wonderful to hear. So, for everyone listening, what is Mindsigns Health?
So Mindsigns Health is a platform to start off with. It's a platform for brain health. Okay, so we do two things on that platform. The first one, which is the more mature part of the platform, is we do EEG analysis. Okay, so we capture data that comes from various pieces of hardware in a hospital, either in a hospital or in a doctor's office. We capture that data, we process that data on a cloud-based platform, and then serve it back to the end user, who's actually the clinician or the neurologist, or whoever needs to look at an EEG result, and we do that automatically. Right now, there's no real automated software. If you talk to neurologists, there's some very nice softwares out there, with all the bells and the whistles, but not necessarily automated. And so we do the detection of seizures, spikes, which are, the way I explain what spikes are is, if seizure is an earthquake, the spikes are the aftershocks, and the spikes are very transient in nature. They're in the milliseconds, right? And it's sharp and down. So they're very tough to detect. But from a treatment point of view, if you're being treated already for seizures and a spike shows up, that means you had a seizure. You don't know when, you don't necessarily know where, but there's been a seizure. And that means that maybe there's a need to, modify the treatment because you're still having seizures. And we do slowing. So slowing shows up in concussions, brain encephalopathy. Again, it's not something that's very precise, but it tells you something is happening in the brain that's creating slowing of your brain wave, more slowing than should be. Because as you age, your brain, some of your background waveforms slow down, etc. So you do get slowing. So that's the first thing that we do. And then actually, what happened is we were approached by one of the institutes that wanted to know if we could tell anything on mental health with EEG. And actually, unless there's some real structural deficits, you can't really tell that much, right? Well, at least at that time. And but we had, like I said before, we were starting to develop verbal, non-verbal algorithms, etc. And we said, well, we could try this, microfacial expression, the visual part of things. And lo and behold, for schizophrenia patient, we could actually look at negative symptoms, which are the really, really the debilitating symptoms for these patients, and cognitive impairment. And so there are three basic, as you know, there are three basic symptoms for serious mental illness across a number of indications. It's the psychosis, or positive symptoms, right? So I hear things, I see things, etc. Negative symptoms, which is blunted affect, so you show no emotion, no enjoyment, alogia, which is poverty of speech, etc., and then the cognitive impairment. And usually negative symptoms and cognitive impairment are comorbid to each other. But whereas with psychosis, it's druggable, there are treatments out there, not necessarily great treatments because of the side effects, but there are treatment, antipsychotics, etc. whereas for negative symptoms, there aren't, right? It's basically talk therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, rapid eye movement therapy, etc. So that's what we, and it's difficult to monitor because you have to monitor across a set of symptoms, right? Uh, and a lot of those are overlapping. For example, in schizophrenia and major depressive disorder, there's a lot of overlap, right, between those symptoms and as well as other indications. So what we do is we look at the trends of those symptoms and basically capture that information outside, right? We don't need to be in the doctor's office because people like you, they can make a diagnosis, etc. With the blink of an eye. There's no, why should I, insert myself in that? Where we are is where you cannot be, is once the patient leaves the office. And unless that patient calls you, or their caregiver calls you, you don't know what's happening until the next time, hopefully, they come for the next session. And then, they'll tell you. So here we capture that information and provide that information on two different sets of dashboard. One is for the patient, where we provide quite a bit of information to basically understand what the mental status of that patient is for that specific day, for example. And so we record the patient using a very simple instrument. It's called a mobile phone, right? And we ask for your consent. We don't need to record you all day long. We just need to record 30 minutes, 40 minutes of conversation at various times of the day. And in between, we add some complementary data through what's called EMA, ecological momentary assessment, which are digital phenotyping type of questions. And if you do not consent to be recorded, then we ask you a bit more questions just to get an understanding of where you were at and etc. And that includes also some, about suicidal thoughts, more in terms of wellness checks, right? Then we try to provide actions, and we've developed all this with clinicians, right? Therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, on a pretty global basis to make sure that we captured any cultural bias that there might be, etc. There's still some cultural bias, but for example, now we're bringing this to the US. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check our algorithms, which have been developed in Asia, against a US cohort and make sure we have the right weightage. And if we don't, then we adjust that to take into account some of that bias, language bias, cultural biases, etc. So, long answer to your short question.
So that's an excellent overview. With NeuroBrowser to start with, which was the first brainchild of Mindsigns Health, creating this software that's able to assess and interpret EEGs saves clinicians a whole lot of time, right?
A lot of time.
So the neurologist may take an hour to an hour and a half to manually annotate a 24-hour EEG reading, whereas NeuroBrowser can annotate EEG readings for clinical markers of neurological disorders with accuracy that does not fade with human fatigue in just 6 to 10 minutes. And
even less.
Wow,
even less.
really?
Yeah.
What's the figure now?
Well, okay, so it depends if we use, it depends on the compute, right? If we start using GPUs, then it's almost 10 times faster. But from a startup point of view, at this point, it's, there's a cost to using GPUs on a continuous basis. So, but over time, obviously, if we start transferring all this to GPUs, it goes a lot faster. One thing that I want to state also is the fact that we're not better than the neurologist. We're not better than the EEG technician. Okay. What we do is we take what's a tedious amount of work off the table. So either the neurologist or the EEG tech can see more patients, right, and are able to monitor more patients. The hospital can process more patients, but also, and that's important, being able to do continuous EEG. And continuous EEG, like you said, are EEGs that are long term. You have extended EEG, which are 3 hours or more, and then you have the continuous EEGs, which could be 24 hours, 48 hours, 96 hours, or even more. And that's a lot of data, right? For a clinician to be able to process and annotate. So there are things that are done to try to speed up the process, but obviously to do that, you miss a lot of data, a lot of information. We're able to do the entire trace, and like you said, in about 5 to 7 minutes. Again, it depends on the complexity of the trace. If there's a lot of abnormal waves and or backgrounds, etc. But yeah, it's a productivity tool. Just like
Yep.
just like GenMind is, it's a productivity tool as well.
Yeah.
It's the ability to monitor patients more efficiently, and hopefully at the end, it's to have better outcomes.
Yeah, saving clinicians time and resources enables them to focus on the delivery of quality care, um,
Yeah.
developing a strong therapeutic alliance whilst optimizing costs. And of course, NeuroBrowser um, is a product that is more for neurology. And
Mm-hmm.
here we may be more interested in GenMind, which is more for mental health rather than neurology. And the remote monitoring and assessment software that you use to improve access to care and empower that patient-doctor relationship, extending far beyond the confines of a consultation, but continuously via the smartphone. It has the same outcome, really, of being able to um, facilitate better care and better relationships. So the technology that you employ to capture and analyze the digital biomarkers that you briefly touched on, there are a variety of these
Right.
technologies: speech and signal processing, natural language processing, facial expression analysis, and body gesture analysis. So, how have these been progressing in terms of your technology? Has this been something that is continually advancing? And what unique value does this combination of these different types of technology provide to the users of GenMind?
Mm. So, I mean, we like you said, we do facial analysis, gesture analysis. Actually, we've developed a kind of a skeleton or avatar that measures certain body movement, angular momentum, certain indications of certain markers of motion. But from the problem with that, okay, is from a privacy point of view. So we mostly use the verbal, non-verbal algorithms. The facial and body motions, depending on the indication, may just add, a couple of percentage of points of accuracy, which, in the big scheme of things doesn't matter that much. And if it's to protect the privacy of the patient, then we don't use it. I mean, obviously, we deal with high risk individual, right? So we're always careful in the way we capture the data, the way we collect, capture the data, the way we process that data, the way we store it eventually for processing, and then the way we get rid of that data. Okay, and actually we've been certified by TÜV and IEEE. We're the first company to have been certified for the AI quality assessment framework, which means that the way our cybersecurity is, the way we do the whole data lifecycle management is we meet all the various qualifications, the ISO standards, etc. And that was a lot of work. That was about 3 years worth of work to get to that point. It was important to do because we need to demonstrate to both clinicians and patients that we care about the data that we collect, and we care about their privacy and their well-being as well, right? Because privacy also goes with well-being. So we use the verbal, non-verbal, and we use a lot of different variables, features, etc. We analyze a lot of various markers using various combinations of algorithms. We also use standard statistical analysis. Okay, it's not all AI or deep learning. There's also very good tools in standard classical statistical analysis that we use, and those tools enable us to basically analyze and look at the trends of those various negative symptoms framework, right? Because those negative symptoms, they fall into certain framework like anhedonia, alogia, amotivation, etc., blunted affect. And there's 5 of those that we look at. And through those, like I said before, we have the patient dashboard. So we provide in a easy to understand way the information. We show what happens when you do certain things to try to at least move the behavior more towards where we would like it to go for therapeutic effect. And then for the clinician, because the clinician doesn't want to be inundated with tons of information, etc., we show it in a summary fashion. And if he or she decides to go more into the detail, then they can start using the scale that they've been trained on, etc. We don't really use the scale. It's based on scales, what we look at, but we don't use specific scales per se. We look at those frameworks and say, for example, alogia is getting worse for this patient, or there's some cognitive impairment that's getting worse. Up to you, clinician, to decide whether you should intervene or not, or at least note it for your next session. So we leave quite a bit of that of the decision making process to the individuals, and so we're a decision support tool. We provide information to make which decisions can be made, or at least part of the decision process can be made.
Yeah, providing information that the clinicians need, but is difficult for them to capture and have the time to analyze, facilitating that decision-making process. It's fascinating to me that Mindsigns has the capacity to use something like facial expression analysis and body gesture analysis alongside their verbal and nonverbal processing. But you've decided just because we can do it doesn't mean that we should do it, because we also, it conflicts with our value of patient data privacy and security. I think a lot of people who can do something as sophisticated as judging the mental state of someone from using a computer that analyzes your facial expression and body gestures, it would be very tempting to find a way to squeeze that in and make that work, right? Did you find that quite difficult to let go of, or did it seem quite an easy decision because that patient safety is so at the forefront of your mind?
I mean, obviously, we're torn, right, by the beautiful science, right, and the technology and the potential innovation, and the need of the patient and the need of the clinician. And so when you try to remove yourself a bit from that, and then, like you said, it comes back to values. Right? Why are we doing this for? Is it for beautiful to show the world that we can do beautiful technology, beautiful science, or is it to be impactful and try to improve things? Right. In the end, it's obviously because we want to be impactful and we want to try to improve the life of these patients, and so then the decision becomes a lot easier. Although you're still you're torn, but hey, there's some point where we might be able to use it. For example, if somebody says, we'd like to monitor, in a big ward patients, then we could use it, because in a hospital, the notion of privacy becomes different, right? As opposed to an individual that's out in the communities, where there's a different notion of privacy. But if it's in a hospital or in a psych intensive care unit, we could use it. At this point, we would have to do a bit more development on it, obviously, because we've been concentrating on the verbal and non-verbal part. But we haven't thrown it away; it's still there. But like I said, it doesn't add that much accuracy to the overall accuracy of the information that we provide, right? So that was also something to take into account when deciding to kind of put that on the shelf.
Of course. Yeah. Well, it's sitting on the shelf, ready for when the market is ready, and I'm sure it will have its value one day. But for now, it's good to hear that just the verbal and non-verbal um, processing in real time is enough to have a very high standard of accuracy. And that being taken continuously opens the opportunity up for being able to predict deteriorations and identify when patients are at high risk, of course, for um, maybe harming themselves. So,
Right.
is this something that you have considered making a use case, and how would GenMind play a role there?
So in terms of coming back to accuracy, so as you know, the inter-rater agreement in psychology is pretty low, right? And the reason for that is just like for EEG interpretation and analysis, there's a certain amount of subjectivity, right, to analyzing the data, and there's also a lot of overlapping symptoms. Uh, and the patient usually is not purely a schizophrenia patient. There's some comorbidities that are there. It's like bipolar patient. There might be some psychotic comorbidities that are in the bipolar patient. So there's a lot of, you know, overlapping symptoms. So what we try to do is take a bit of that subjectivity out, because obviously the algorithms are trained on data that's been collected across a lot of different clinician and patient cohorts. So by doing that, we're not necessarily better than a single psychiatrist, but we're as good as a cohort, right?
Hmm.
And so that's important to keep in mind. Same thing with EEG. We're not better. We're as good. And that's all I don't want to be better. I want to be as good. Because again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide additional information. I'm not here to compete against the skill set and the years and years of experience of a clinician looking at patients on a daily basis. I'm not there to do that. I'm there to provide additional information that's not necessarily there, or information that's tedious to collect, etc. So I think it's important to um, to state that, because a lot of time when people think, oh, you're using AI or deep technology, etc., algorithms, you got to be better than the doctors. No, I don't have to be better than that, because the doctors are providing me with those annotation that I
Hmm.
train my algorithms on. So at this point in time, I'm not better, and we're not at the point where the AI becomes completely intelligent and goes on its own and starts developing its own training data. Right? We're not there. Uh, so that's important to state. From a use case point of view, so so all this was developed with actual patients, our algorithms. We had the good fortune of working with one of the institutions in Singapore that deals with mental health, and with schizophrenia patients, with depression patients, and we have healthy patients. Uh, so those were developed with actual patients, not looking at papers, etc., trying to see what potential markers were there. And now, like I said, we're moving that to a much bigger patient cohort outside of Singapore. And the use case is what has become the metric now in serious mental illness is, how do we mitigate negative symptoms, cognitive impairment, to improve functional outcomes? Because that's what's important, right? Can we
Hmm.
improve the way the patient functions? And depending on where that patient is on the spectrum, can that patient become productive? Can that patient, hold a job? Or can that patient socialize and go out, etc.? So that's what we're looking at from a use case point of view, more like an objective to strive for, is by being able to monitor negative symptoms, cognitive impairment, are we able to improve functional outcomes? The function of the patient, and that's the end result that we're looking for, and that clinicians are looking for now. It's not about, can you lower the percentage of that specific symptoms by, this much, etc. It's not about that anymore. It's about by being able to monitor those symptoms, intervene on those symptoms, can you improve the functional outcome of the patient? And that's what we're working on.
And how do you measure these functional outcomes?
I leave it up to you guys. So you tell me how it's measured, and that's what we're doing. There are a number of scales out there to do that. There are a number of ways to assess that, but it's all contingent on looking at certain symptoms depending on the indication that drive towards the improvement of the functional outcomes. And it's like in schizophrenia, there are a lot of scales. Depression, there are a lot of scales. And coming back to the beginnings, when I started looking at this, I was like, we can't develop algorithms for each of those scales. Otherwise, we'll still be in the lab by the time we're 100 years old. So it was, how do we assess this? And same thing with functional outcomes. How do we assess what are the measures that we can use to see if what we do alongside with clinician can improve outcomes? And it's not about completely, 100% improvement, even 10, 15% improvements. I think, you tell me, but from talking with various clinicians, 10 to 15% improvements make a big difference in patients, especially when they're out in the community. So that's what we're striving for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess working so closely with clinicians like myself really guides the product development and making sure it's clinically valid. I understand that also other types of partnerships are key to your success. So, what kind of partnerships have you established, and how are you leveraging these?
So we're so as opposed to EEG, which is very different. Trying to get data for mental health is a lot tougher, right? Because again, you're dealing with the patient that are high risk, but also, my brain waves, your brain waves, somebody in China, somebody in Africa, it's the same, right? Mental health is different. There are cultural biases, there are national differences, etc. And so we need to be able to port what we do all the time. In EEG, what works in Singapore will work in the Netherlands, will work in the US, right? Because it's the same brainwave. There's no difference in brainwave. There's no cultural bias to a brain to an EEG analysis. Whereas in mental health there is, and actually a strong bias. There's a language bias as well, right? The way somebody uses language to express themselves can change from one ethnicity to another within the same country, and we need to be able to assess that. Because one of the things when we're talking with some of the agencies in the US to develop and port our software there is the fact that certain ethnicities are not well served with these types of algorithms. And one of the things that we intend to work on, and we started doing that, is how do we mitigate that, right? So that those various ethnicities can benefit from the work we're doing, and obviously, and it's so that comes back to health inequity, right? Health inequity, trying to provide access to care. If you look at the U.S., for example, over 140 million people do not have access to a psychiatrist. What they call psychiatric deserts, right? 50% of the counties don't have a psychiatrist within 100 miles, which is quite a big distance, right?
Wow.
So they lack access to care. So hopefully by providing at least remote monitoring and working with some of these other companies that provide therapists or that put you in touch with the various mental health providers, hopefully we can provide a better access or an improved access, not better access, and improved access. And that's also part of why we're doing this, right? And it comes back to the impact. And again, if we can, small improvements make a big difference in especially in mental health, right? Small
Definitely.
improvement make a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when that improvement is just access. People need the care and they would benefit from the care that already exists. You don't even have to improve that. You just need to facilitate accessing it. Really unlocking a whole wealth of support for them. So definitely the potential to access these people in the most remote parts of the world by only needing your smartphone. Of course, to start with, it will be very much clinician led and guided, but the potential is there for sure with very, very remote places in the world. Remote monitoring can help overcome these barriers to access, of course.
I mean, there's a lot of apps out there that, I mean, not that many people monitor negative symptoms because it's a bit challenging to do that. But there are plenty of apps out there that are not clinically validated. That's a lot of them actually. And from the get-go, we wanted clinician to validate the work that we're doing, because again, we're dealing with serious mental illness. We're not dealing with people that have a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress. Not that there's no place for that. There is place for those types of products. But we're dealing with a different set of people that have serious mental illness, that are diagnosed, that are under care. Although there's only 50% of people that are diagnosed that are really under care. And by being clinically validated, we have a lot of papers out there, including one that appeared in November of last year, 2022, in Nature, schizophrenia, which was for us, a big reward of all the years spent on developing this. It was important to be clinically validated so that eventually we can move upstream, right? So just like in diabetes, for example, people may be at risk of developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, because their behavior, or maybe it's family history, genetics, etc. Same thing is true for serious mental health diseases, right? There may be some family history, there may be some genetics, etc. Or an accident that is triggering something in your brain that makes you develop comorbidities. So the ability to move upstream and monitor, and for those people to monitor themselves, they may not be on the care, but they want to monitor themselves. And as you know, a lot of times, about 70% of the time, negative symptoms present before a full episode of psychosis and negative symptoms, right? So if we can catch that, just like pre-diabetes, we can catch it before a patient or potential patient tips over, then it's a big help for the system, for the payer, for the provider, and obviously for the patient's quality of life. So the clinical validation is very important. A lot more work, a lot more money to be spent, etc. But it's important. If you have a long-term vision, if you have a short-term vision, then you don't do it. You just go out there in the market and then hope that people start using it. But we have a different vision for this product.
Yeah, no, I can see that you're choosing the right way rather than the easy way, which I think has been, failing to do that has been the demise of a lot of mental health technology startups of late. And it may be why the journey has been more painstaking than what you would have liked, but
for sure,
it will stand the test of time when push does come to shove. So that's wonderful to hear. I wonder, in your when you develop the lab to market curriculum as a visiting lecturer at the Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology Center, you will have had to have advised students and executives who were students in that room how to keep that long-term strategy whilst also wanting to penetrate the market as efficiently as possible. So can you give some insight into those principles and perhaps how you've implemented those principles in Mindsigns Health to transition from lab to market in a successful way?
So the first thing I do when my first lecture, I always start the same. I start by saying entrepreneurship sucks. And then I wait silently, and people start looking at each other like, whoa, what are we doing here? And then I follow by, unless you have the right frame of mind. Not
Hmm.
everybody can be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's risky. The chances of success are not great, right? It's a long journey. And, you've read it before. It said, I'm not inventing anything, but it's about the journey. It's again
Hmm.
the fire in the belly. You have a vision. You see something that needs improvement in the market, or there's a gap that you feel you can fill because you have a piece of technology, you have a piece of science, or whatever, and it can't be the money. So when my first lesson is always about that, to try to give people a pragmatic understanding of what entrepreneurship is about, right? Because one of my pet peeves is the fact that people glamorize entrepreneurship. It's not glamorous. There's nothing. It's like the restaurant business. My father was in the restaurant business. Nothing glamorous about the restaurant business. It's a long, tedious hours of, but something. My father was passionate about food and feeding people, and so it's the same thing here. It comes back to the fire in the belly, right?
Hmm.
And then you have to. So how do you take an idea from the lab to the market? There's a lot of different things, and it's a continuum, right? One thing that's important to understand is it's not discrete steps along the way, right? It's a continuum. You start with, you have a nice piece of science. You have to build a technology from that science. You have to have some funding to be able to get that along, right? And there's different feeders all along that continuum. Eventually, you get to institutional investors, which are the VCs, right? Or the high net worth individual or family offices that have basically built an institution around their fortune to be able to have a steady process in how to do things. Uh, IP strategy, if it's IP, how do you develop an IP strategy? Because that's another thing that I tell people. Ideas are great, but they're a dime they're a dime a dozen. Look around the room. You're all PhD, postdocs, masters. You're all educated, intelligent people. You don't have monopoly on the ideas, right?
Hmm.
It's the execution. How do you execute, right? And you can make a so-so idea into a great product, right? By having a great execution, but a great idea with a so-so execution can be completely go down the drain. It's about the
Hmm.
execution, and 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 there's no real recipe, right? There's frameworks of things, right? You have to think about your IP. You have to think, depending if it's hardware, you have to design. The way you design your product for manufacturing has to be so that it's you can manufacture it and it's not going to cost you hundreds of thousands to manufacture one unit, right? So the unit price of that product is important. So there's a lot of things that come into play. And obviously, one person doesn't have all those skill sets. So you start building your team depending on the product, and you start to try to bring those skill sets in. They either come in as advisors, or they come in as part of the team, inherently part of the product building team. Uh, and that's how you do it. But the funding is you know, the funding is the gas, right? You can build
Hmm.
the best car, but it's not going to go anywhere if there's no gas in the car, right? You
Hmm.
can build the engine. You may have all the skill set, unless you put gas in it, it stands still. It doesn't go anywhere. And it's the same thing here. You need to have that ability to get people to see what you're trying to do, to invest. And it's not so easy especially in stuff that's really medical. Uh, and then for us, we have the misfortune of being tagged as digital, right? So, and people's notion of digital is, oh, digital, easy stuff, right? Algorithms, blah, blah, blah. And then when I start saying we need regulatory, we need to be approved, CE mark,
Hmm.
ISO 13485, FDA 510K, they're like, but you're digital. Yeah, but it's medical, we still have
Hmm.
to have some regulatory oversight because we're dealing with patients that are, in clinical environments, etc. So, the fundraising part is really the tough part, and those go in cycles. So right now we're in a pretty bad cycle for investing in life science, biotech, etc., uh, especially medical stuff. Some of the other lighter digital health tech is getting funded, but the real medical stuff is having difficulty as always. So
Yeah. Well, passing through those regulatory loops and hoops and hurdles, I'm sure, will make all the difference when it comes to
yes, yeah,
whether an investor or VC decides to invest, because it goes from something that has an amber light to something that has a green light. So all the work that you're currently doing in the regulatory side of things, it really will unlock a lot, I think,
yeah,
particularly when you're dealing with such vulnerable patients at risk. So yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
it's interesting. I sense from the way you speak about practicalities and limitations and being efficient, um, the inner engineer coming out in you. And I wonder, how useful is your background in aerospace engineering? How useful is that in the work that you do today?
It's funny you said that because one of the things that I like to do is mentor young people or sit down with them. And yesterday I did that for 2 hours with actually a mate of mine that I went to business school with. His son was coming through Singapore, and he said, "No, can you meet with him and just have a chit chat?" And we're talking about that and the fact. So he's non-technical in his person, in his field of study, and I told him take a few technical courses because it will help you. For me, for sure. I mean, going from aerospace engineering to life sciences, doing drug discovery, drug delivery, MedTech. The training I had as an engineer was very helpful for me to
Mm,
be able to grab things, grab concept, uh, some of them abstract concept. I think the engineering training, thinking in logical steps and going through ideas in logical steps fashion to try to understand it, and being always curious. That's the other important thing. That's what I was telling this young man yesterday. Is I'm an old guy, but I still spend 35% of my time learning new things. Otherwise, I become irrelevant really quickly, right? Because technology, science is moving so fast these days, so fast. If you want to stay relevant and keep doing what you're doing, you need to constantly learn, right? Otherwise,
mm,
you fall quickly by the wayside. So yeah, definitely 35% of my time at least is spent on doing that. And it's important also for example, the work I do in Mindsigns, be abreast of all the new stuff that's coming up, large language models, for example. We're going to start incorporating that. Obviously, my co-founder Justin works on that, but me, from my point of view, I need to understand that as well. How do I incorporate that into our product? How do I incorporate so it makes the product better, not just for the sake of saying, hey, we have LLM in our product, blah, blah, blah.
mm,
It's got to have some functionality that improves the product and that serves the product and that keeps that product to pushing the envelope as technology evolves. So yeah, I think it's very important to have that curiosity and also that thirst for learning.
mm,
And I think that's what engineering or science training does for you. It makes you, and obviously the reason you go into science or engineering is because, you like to learn things, complex things, right? Or more challenging things. And so for me, I mean, I love this job. People go, so when are you going to retire? I go, I'll retire when I'm like this. I'll never retire. I wouldn't
yeah.
know what to do with myself.
Mm,
Uh, it's yeah, and working with young people, that's it's even better. I mean, the average age of Mindsigns, the team in Mindsigns is early 30s, right? So it's fantastic to be able to work with young people.
yeah, absolutely. And I can
Mm.
tell your tenacity and your energy is still as youthful as I'm sure it's always been. there's a long way before you would ever have to think about retiring, which is great news for us all. But one part of that youthful spirit is, as you said, the constant journey of learning and discovery that is inherent in both engineering, science, and of course, now for you, entrepreneurship. So, what are you learning about these days?
So, like I said, large language models. When I started working with algorithms, etc., I took a course in Stanford on machine learning because I didn't want to look like a fool. So I took, and the learning curve was quite steep, I have to say. But it also means that, I'm not the expert. I'm never the expert, right? But I know enough that I can see if there's, potential for something, right? A piece of science, a piece of technology, etc. And so I know how to surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than me. And my job is to make everybody work in the same direction toward a similar set of objectives, right? And that's important. That's important to be able to do that and motivate people. Obviously, the startup journey is difficult. There's a lot of frustrations. So keeping a team motivated is an important part of doing things. And I can see sometimes the team is frustrated. We put in proposals for projects. We don't get them when everybody says, there's no problem, you're going to get it. And all of a sudden we don't get it. It's a big letdown, and we got to keep, remotivating ourselves and the reason why we're doing this. And again, it comes back fire in the belly, doing the impactful thing, etc. But in terms of what am I learning is actually one of the things I'm learning is, because I've been managing people, I've been in entrepreneurship quite a while, is my style of management has had to change. Because the way I managed people 10, 15 years ago is very different than the way I manage people now. Because the younger generation have different set of expectations from a job or a career, right? And my job is to, show them a career path, keep them challenged with the work that we do. And if I can't do that, then I lose them. And and I don't blame them. They go somewhere with, And the other thing is being able to balance, the work life balance, right? Having a work life balance, that's very important for the younger people, more so than, for example, my generation. I mean, we work 16-hour days, no problem, right? There has to be a work life balance, and I can understand that. And if I had to do it again, I probably would change it as well. But back then, that's the way it was, right? You work long hours, etc. So that's something important that I've had to not to learn, but to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Adapt, because adapting is also part of learning, right? You adapt to different things and different challenges, etc. In terms of actual learning, like I said, I'm always learning. I'm always curious about things. Sometimes things that have nothing to do with what I should be doing, right? Just because I'm interested. Somewhere it will pop up or color, my understanding of something or my decision on something. So my father used to always tell me, "There's no stupid job, only stupid people." Right? Every job you can learn something from every job. There's no stupid job. You can grasp something from every job, and that's something that I've taken. I've done a lot of different things, like you said at the beginning, and every one of those things that I've done have led me to where I am now, and I continue to learn. It's important, otherwise, life is boring.
Yeah, definitely. Not just in every job, but in every experience, there is something there. It's just up to you to find it and to turn it into something that works for you rather than against you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
And you can learn from young people, old people. There's some people that I deal with. They're in the 80s. They're in their 80s, right? And sometimes I think to myself, oh my God, I hope my brain keeps boiling like theirs. I mean, they still have ideas that are coming out, etc. It has nothing to do with age. I think it has to do with, your the way you look at things, the way you look at life, and not saying, oh, I'm that age, that's it, and start letting yourself go. No, you just got to keep driving. And like I said, some people in their 80s, I'm like, my God, how do they come up with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so you can learn from anybody.
Well, it's fantastic that you can work with both a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old with the same sense of respect and
Yeah.
equal footing, and I'm sure that's what's led to you working well in all the teams that you have worked in, and
Mhm.
especially the one that you're leading now, the Mindsigns
Yeah.
Health.
Respect is, I mean, you hit on the word respect.
Mm,
Very important. Respect.
yeah,
The word respect. Respect goes both ways, right? You have to
definitely.
respect yeah, important. Respect and integrity. Those
Hmm.
are two important things. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure all those values um, they come through in the product if they are embedded within the culture of the team making
Mhm.
that product. So it will manifest in ways that aren't just good for the health of the team, but also for the patients that you end up impacting as well. So
I hope so.
just yeah, no, I hope so too. Just to wind things down, then I just have one final question for you, um, which is in keeping with the theme we've gradually moved towards, which is a little bit more about um, taking care of people, taking care of yourself, and thinking about your lifestyle as well as work. So my question to you is, Michel, what do you do to take care of your own mental health?
Mhm. I mean, I have bouts sometimes, and really sometimes pretty, I wouldn't say severe, but impactful bouts. So I try to do meditation as much as possible. I try to do it every day. Exercise is very
Mm,
important to me. Swimming, uh, going to the gym, uh, playing music. In my youth, I used to play in bands, so
mm,
that's music has always been kind of a nice outlet. One thing that I wish I could do, I just don't have the time at all, is painting. I used to paint.
mm.
Uh, so things like, again, it comes back to creative things, right?
Yeah,
Creating things. I like to create things. For example, at one point I was a pastry chef.
wow,
Again, it's creating, right? You're
yeah,
creating food, and to this day I still do it, although not as much as I would like to.
mm,
But all those things are outlets that are kind of not completely off kilter, but are somewhat relevant to what I do, because the thread is always this creative, innovative, trying to come up with new stuff, etc. But meditation, and I would say meditation, exercising, and is important on a day-to-day basis. The other
yep,
stuff is when I can find the time. But meditation and exercising are important, and also spending time with my best friend, which is my wife.
mm,
Um, we still have,
beautiful,
after all these years, we still crack each other up a lot of times, and that helps, especially during COVID. In Singapore, it was
mm,
a bit tough. Uh,
strict,
yeah, very strict. And I remember at the beginning, I was like, "Oh shit, we're gonna be the two of us between four walls." But actually, it was fantastic. I tell you,
yeah,
and we kind of relearned how to communicate, relearn how to enjoy each other, and do things. And that's been very helpful, and to kind of reinvigorate the relationship. So for me, COVID had a kind of a silver lining, although from a company point of view, from Mindsigns point of view, it was 2.5 years of
mm,
really being in the basement for all intents and purposes, because that's the time when we spun out. Right around the time we spun out, we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't meet with anybody, and so it was 2.5 years, really tough. very tough. But yeah, coming back, that's what I do. It's meditation and exercise to kind of release all that stress and frustration that builds up on a daily basis.
Well,
Mm.
I'm sure all that meditation and exercise gives you a much sharper focus on what needs to be done at Mindsigns Health and keeping you guys on track in your mission, on your pursuit to harnessing the power of advancing technology to ultimately improve care and outcomes for patients. And it's been wonderful to hear about your journey, all of the ways Mindsigns Health is progressing, and the wonderful work that you and your team are doing, um, leveraging digital
With your help.
biomarkers.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. But yeah, leveraging digital biomarkers is certainly an area that is very exciting right now, and it's wonderful to hear that it's there are very good people working on that to
Yeah.
improve patient journey and the doctor-patient relationship. So, Michel, it's been wonderful. For everyone
Thank you
listening,
very much, Tim.
you're very welcome. For everyone listening, Michel, would you like to share anything in particular, or perhaps the ways that people can support Mindsigns Health, if at all?
Yeah, if there's anybody with any funding out there, we can use the funding. But if people are interested in finding out what we do, please get in touch with us, including people that would like to test the product on an individual basis, or participate in how the product could be better. I mean, we're always takers of feedback, obviously. And then, for people that are interested in entrepreneurship, make sure this is something. It's almost like I wouldn't. It may be a bit pretentious, but it's almost like a calling, right? Because you see something out there, and if you want to do it, then do it, right? Do it, because otherwise that's going to keep gnawing at you, right? And if you fail, then you fail, no problem, right? Just make sure that there's a lot of externalities that are out of your control. It doesn't mean that it's that you didn't do the right things, that your technology wasn't good. Sometimes, as they say, shit happens, and there's plenty of great technology that's is by the roadside. But if you have if you feel you need to fill a gap in the market, or you see a problem in the market, then go do it. Go do it, or be part of it at least. If you can't do it yourself, be part of it.
Absolutely, I'm sure. It leads to a very fulfilling life, and the alternative is perhaps a life more unlived, which is a greater risk than the risk that you would take by trying. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
It's straight from the mouth of someone who has really lived by that advice, Michel, and it means that much more because of it. So, Michel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and
thank you very
yeah.
much for having me, and for the great questions. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Of course. Well, until next time, all the best.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this insightful discussion. If you did, the best way for you to support the MindTech podcast is by sharing this episode with someone, subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing your thoughts in a comment. If you're interested in learning a little more about your mind and how you can get the most from your most powerful resource, you can check out The Mind Explored, an email newsletter I send each week with an insight into your mind and a tool to improve it. You can access all the articles and subscribe at www.mindtechpodcast.com. Thank you for your interest in the mind and how technology can meet its needs. Until next time, goodbye.